Hello Lorcana YouTube community and all my fellow Sapphire and Steel players. Today I am very excited to showcase my brand new Set 7 Whole New World deck profile and deck guide titled Crab World. What was lacking last set that made the deck pretty weak was having not that good early game defense and then the mid game consistency of being able to ramp, not falling behind in lore, and setting up a singer, because if you do want to sing Whole New World, you want to make sure that your opponent doesn't have a bigger board than you and the lore isn't out of control. And I just felt like it was just too weak. Now with the addition of these 3 cards, that actually upgrades all those issues on a whole other level. For example, with a card like Belle, we get to replace weak cards like Captain Hook, Calhoun, and now Belle can take up those slots. Being able to consistently ramp on turn 2 without having to worry about applying a body on board is crazy. You can TIPO on turn 2 and also play a Belle for free if you banish a popsicle that you played on turn 1. With the addition of Belle, we have Miss Bianca. Miss Bianca is a 6-cost inkable character with the stat lines 5/5, but her effect is insane. Her effect reads, if you have an ally character on board, you can reduce her play cost by 2. So if you TIPO on turn 2, that means you can bring out Miss Bianca on turn 3. So on turn 4, you can actually sing a Whole New World or a card like Alamkane Zeus. That speed and pressure that was lacking last set, now with these 2 cards being able to fight the board back and being able to sing a Whole New World first without having to set up Quill, and even if you set up Quill after, it's still very strong, because with that extra ink that you do play Fishbone Quill on turn 4, you can play a card like Pete, and then this meta Pete is very strong. For the last upgrade is going to be this new legendary 6-cost Tamatoa. Tamatoa on play, you're able to retrieve 2 items back from your discard to your hand, and then when Tamatoa quests, you're able to play an item for free, and that item does not come in exerted. Yes, that means if this character quests, you can play Lucky Dime for free. Being able to recycle the 1-drop items is just super strong, super consistent with our Hiram. And then if Tamatoa is able to quest, being able to play a card like Lucky Dime for free and just get an insane amount of burst lore is just crazy. Not having to wait like last set until you get to 8 ink and play big Tamatoa. Now with these 2 crabs plus Lucky Dime and with the combination of a card like Ariel, that lore pressure is there in the mid game as well. I will be going into detail on every card and why I think it fits in the deck, and at the end of the video, as always, I'll be going over mulligans and certain tech choices that you can use for the deck as well. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Definitely helps the channel grow and it means a lot. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and also drop a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of the deck list. I'll have timestamps in the description as well if you want to go back and listen to key points in certain cards. So before we go and break down each card, I just want to pretty much just give a summary on how this deck works and what makes this list what it is. Again, we're focusing on being able to turn to ramp consistently. That's why we're playing 10 copies of ramp. We're playing 4 copies of TIPO, 4 copies of Fishbone Quill, and 2 copies of Sell the Azurite Sea. Since we always want to play turn 2 ramp, we got to make sure that we open up that turn 1 item just in case we need to play Belle to fight the early board. And then after you ramp on turn 2, you have 2 options. If you did it with TIPO, you can focus on a Whole New World line of play with Miss Bianca, or if you don't have Miss Bianca or Whole New World, we have a nice backup plan with Tala and Hiram. Being able to sing Zeus as well the following turn is just insane. Those 2 different lines of plays on turn 4 is absolutely crazy for different matchups, and depending on your hand, you're able to go with either or. After that, let's say for example you go with the Miss Bianca play, you can set up a Cogsworth or Fishbone Quill after to start setting up your explosion turn with a card like Tamatoa, either of the 2 crabs. And if you don't see that Miss Bianca, you can just play a little bit more slower with being able to go Tala or Hiram, following up with the Cogsworth or a Tinkerbell or Miss Bianca, and then singing Whole New World after that, refilling your hand, and now you have access to all the tools that you have. This deck has a combination of that really nice early mid-game with a card like Belle, Tala, and Pete, and then a nice strong mid-game board contender with Cogsworth and Tinkerbell, and then you have the new legendary card Tamatoa having that fast pressure into those Ruby decks, because if you get a dime out, your opponent's going to be on a clock. Now, let's go ahead and get into the deck profile and go each card one by one and the different lines of plays that you can use with it. To start off the deck list, we're playing 4 copies of TIPO. We're playing TIPO because we're playing the new card Miss Bianca. Again, TIPO is an ally, so you're able to reduce the cost of Miss Bianca by 2. So since we can consistently ramp on turn 2 and potentially on turn 3, instead of bringing out a card like Hiram or Tala, we can actually bring out a 6 cost Singer, and that's going to enable us to sing Whole New World or a card like Alamkane Zeus on turn 4. Even if we miss Bianca and we have TIPO or Sale, we can always fall back on turn 3 with a card like Tala or Hiram. I think this combination works really well, and then TIPO being able to pair really well with this next card, which is going to be 4 copies of BELLE. BELLE, you're able to play her for free if you banish an item. So if you go Popsicle turn 1, that means on turn 2, you can always go TIPO or Sale, and then play BELLE as well to fight the board back. If you have TIPO and BELLE, that's going to be 4 damage on board that can fight back a card like Daisy, which was super annoying last set. Being able to consistently ramp on turn 2 and then still apply pressure with a bigger body on the board is just a huge upgrade to this deck, and it speeds up a lot of the early game. Followed by BELLE, we have 2 copies of Pete. I think we are in a Pete meta. There's going to be a lot of steel everywhere, a lot of ways to remove opposing Tamatoas, and I think Pete is just still in a good spot as well to counter Be Prepared. I can see an argument playing more than 2 copies of Pete, but right now I think 2 copies is just fine. Since we're playing more copies of turn 2 ramp, we actually want to play 2 copies of Grandma Tala. Tala is a very good alternative than playing a Hiram or Miss Bianca in certain matchups, just because that 3/3 stat line is very strong. She lets us look at the top 2 cards, add one to our hand, so that filter is very strong. And then she can also sing Alamkane Zeus, which we'll get into later, but that's very powerful. After Tala, we have, of course, 4 copies of Hiram. Hiram just being the best card in the deck. But going back to Tala, we're tying that in with playing 2 copies of Cogsworth. So now what makes Cogsworth just overall way better in this deck than just being a singer is we have 2 strong Bardies that can fight back with Cogsworth. So now BELLE being that 3/3 stat line along with Tala, those 2 bodies, then with combination of Cogsworth, can actually fight the board back pretty well. And if you're going against any Amethyst decks, it's going to take at least 2 bodies to trade in with one of them. If it's not a 4 attack stat line, but I think Cogsworth, it just fits really well. And again, we are going to be in a steel meta, and Cogsworth has words, so being able to sing Whole New World is just a really nice card for the deck. Ariel is going to be really nice just because of that speed that we could have with playing Lucky Dime for free with the new Tamatoa card. So being able to gain 5 lore out the next turn is just super fast. And Ariel, it just expect a lot of Ruby out to be in the meta. So I think for Whole New World specifically, being one of those combo pieces cards that you can find in a whole new 7 cards is fine. I like one of, you can up the count on this if you want, but just to keep the uninkable count low, I think 1 copy is just fine. And then we're playing 3 copies of the brand new legendary Tamatoa. Again, being able to recycle 2 cards from your trash back to your hand is just insane, because being able to consistently have those 1-drop items like Popsicle and Fortisphere in the mid game, not worrying that your Hiram is not going to have any items on board to get the draw off to, is just super strong. Even if that's not the case, being able to get back 2 of those cards and paying 2 ink to draw 2 cards anywhere in the mid and the late game is still very strong. But of course, the main effect being if he is able to quest, you can play an item for free. So if we do have Lucky Dime in our hand, that pressure that our opponent's going to feel is going to be on a whole other level, because now they're going to be on a bigger clock, and that enables our other big lore questers like Ariel or the other 8-drop Tamatoa, and that's going to allow us to close out the game very fast. I think having this new card Tamatoa in Whole New World is such a nice card to find after you sing Whole New World, because it's a bigger threat and your opponent now has to answer that. And if you already have Bianca on the board, they're going to have to answer either or. So I think this new Tamatoa piece being able to help end the game faster is insane, and who doesn't want to play a Lucky Dime for free? Followed by Tamatoa, we have another brand new card for set 7, and that's going to be Miss Bianca. Miss Bianca being a 6-drop inkable, and if you have an ally on board, you can reduce her play cost by 2. The 5/5 stat line is very strong, trades into pretty much everything in the meta, even trades into a Maui. So after you sing a Whole New World, if a Maui wants to trade into her, that's fine. But in the mid game, after you sing Whole New World, and if you still have a TIPO on board, potentially being able to bring out 2 more Miss Biancas on turn 4 or 5 is pretty crazy. That stat line again is very strong, and I think being able to sing a Whole New World or a card like Alamkane Zeus by turn 4 is absolutely insane, and again super fast. And this meta, it's all about speed. And then we're playing a good old favorite, 3 copies of Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell, just a very strong card overall into any steel deck. Once you play her on the board, everyone kind of just freezes, everything is stunned for a bit because no one wants to quest. The reason why we dropped 1 Tinkerbell is because we're playing more 6-drop characters, so we're playing Miss Bianca, we're playing Tamatoa, so I think 3 copies is just fine. But this is definitely one of those cards where if you want to play a 4th one, there would be no issue with it. For playing one copy of Arthur, again, we are in a Pete meta, we are in a Sapphire meta, so expect there to be more Petes, Gontus, Ariels just for the mirror match. I think Arthur is still very strong, and since we're playing a card like Miss Bianca and Bill, which can come out relatively cheap, that pairs really well with Arthur being able to swing over ready characters. I think Arthur works really fine in this deck, and since we're not playing Hades, we're playing Arthurs instead to fit for that uninkable slot. For the last character, we're playing 3 copies of 8-drop TAMATOA. I know a lot of people think that this card is pretty slow, but the fact that we're playing Fishbone Quill and Whole New World, this card can just gain an insane amount of lore late game, and if you pair it with a card like P into those Ruby decks, it's going to be super hard for them to remove it. I think both these TAMATOAs add in that pressure in the mid to the late game that the deck needs to be able to combat the deck Ruby Sapphire. But overall, this card is just still very strong. If you miss out on all your combo pieces and just rely on going Quill into this TAMATOA into any matchup, that's still a very strong play. For the actions, we're playing 2 Fire the Cannons. We must respect the bird. We must respect the Diablos or any opposing shift lines. I think Fire the Cannons is still very strong. I know a lot of people are talking about playing Let the Storm the Rage On or Strength of the Raging Fire because we're playing a card like Belle, but I think that kind of messes up our game plan. I think overall Alam Kane Zeus is just a stronger card for removal, and Fire the Cannons also pairs really well with a card like Sell the Azurite Sea. So I think having 2 copies is still fine, but if you want to mess with that ratio, again, that makes perfect sense. Followed by 2 copies of Fire the Cannon, we're playing 2 copies of Sell the Azurite Sea. Since we are playing TIPO, we are playing Grandma Tala, we want to focus a little bit more on our turn 2 ramp. That's why we also dropped a card like Mr. Smee. Like playing a Mr. Smee on 2 was okay last set, but I think now being able to play Belle for free, or if we can focus on getting out a Singer on turn 3, is just way better. So a card like Sell the Azurite Sea helps our game plan in that aspect, and having 2 copies is really, really good. You can mess around the ratio with Sell and TIPO, but I think right now having 2 copies works very well. We're playing 2 copies of Visions of the Future. I think this card is just very strong. You could cut 1 and play the 4th Whole New World, but I think 1 Whole New World should get the job done. And if not, those 2 copies of Visions are going to come up mid to the late game. Just because if you do sing Whole New World, you can have your P, you can have your TAMATOA, but you might not have your Lucky Dime. So being able to find those combo pieces, like also looking at top 5 cards in your deck, even without being a combo base, like just in the mid to the late game, finding your extra high arm, your Whole New World, Vision of the Future is still very strong, and I like 2 copies of Visions in this deck in particular. For the best removal right now is going to be 3 copies of Alam Kane Zeus. Since we're able to sing this with Miss Bianca on turn 4 or with Tala as well, I think that's very strong. That's going to be our shark killer and pretty much can answer anything in the meta. And if we can answer it, we're playing 1 copy of Let It Go, or we could have that 1 Arthur that can potentially Tinkerbell or something else can swing over just in case they have 5 or more willpower. But 1 copy of Let It Go and 3 copies of Zeus and the 1 copy of Arthur are going to be our big removal package. I think this ratio is fine. If you want to mess with the 2 Zeus, 2 Let It Go, that works too. But right now, I'm finding these 5 copies of removal very strong in the current meta. For the main card, Whole New World, why aren't we playing 4? Well, me personally, again, I think 3 copies of Whole New World is fine just because we have cards like Tala, Hiram, Vision of the Future, so we're going to be able to find our copies when we need them. And having 4 just gets a little bit too cloggy. Since we are playing TIPO, you could cut 1 copies of Visions and play the 4th Whole New World, but me personally, I like the 3-2 split with Visions just because, again, with all the filtering in the deck, we will be able to find that copy, and you don't want to open up with too many in your opening hand. For our last removal option is going to be Grab Your Swords. The reason why I didn't sub it in with Zeus and Arthur and Let It Go is because those are more explosives, and right now Swords is just a little bit too niche. It's not that good. Well, it's not good at all into Ruby decks, but it's just a necessary evil to have. It's our only border wipe with Tinkerbell, and since we're playing Miss Bianca and Cogsworth, being able to sing Swords on turn 4 or 5 is still pretty strong. To finish off the deck, we have our item package. Going to be 4 copies of Popsicle, 4 copies of Fortisphere. You cannot go any less. I would not recommend it. 4 copies of Fishbone Quill. This is a card that's going to make Whole New World absolutely broken. Being able to ink every turn, you're able to out-resource your Ruby Sapphire, Ruby Amethyst opponents. And even against anything to steal as well. Just out-resourcing your opponent and playing big bodies on board is what makes Fishbone Quill broken. And then for the last card, 2 copies of Lucky Dime. Since we can potentially play out Lucky Dime for free, why not up the count? I think 2 is fine. I think 3 might be a little bit too greedy. for now in testing, 2 has worked pretty well. That wraps up the deck list. In conclusion, why I think this deck is very strong and why these 3 cards upgraded the deck on a whole other level is because we can consistently ramp on turn 2, not fall behind on border control with a card like BELLE, and then we have an explosive turn 3, turn 4 play, being able to bring out Miss Bianca or Tala, seeing along came ZEUS or Whole New World, and then having that mid-game pressure with Fishbone Quill or the new TAMATOA is absolutely cracked. And I think right now, if you're able to fight the board early, you can always sing a Whole New World, because it won't matter if your opponent gets a brand new 7 cards, just because you're able to fight the board back as well, and then just out-resource your opponent with all this overwhelming pressure. Now for the mulligan, there's going to be 2 different mulligans you can go for. It's going to look like a hand like this or a hand like this. The hand on top is going to be more favored if you want to sing a Whole New World, and then the hand at the bottom is going to be more favored if you want to go more for a Tala high-arm approach and then just fight the board like that. The hand on top is going to be more for if you want to go against any Ruby decks, just because you want to be able to sing a Whole New World and they get Fishbone Quill out and just keep doing that again and again, out resourcing your opponent because of cards like opposing high arms and stuff like that. And then the hand at the bottom, you want to go against this more for like steel decks, anything that's going to be more board focused. You're going to have that high arm and Tala be able to find your bigger game pieces and then be able to sing along King Zeus as well. I think both these hands are very strong, and you can open up either or against either matchup as well. But for the most part, either of these 2 hands is what you're commonly going to see in your opening plays. For tech choices, this list is 61, so you could always go down to 60 cards. You could always cut the 2 copies of Visions in the future and commit to 4 Whole New Worlds. You can mess around with the ratio with TIPO and sell the Azurite Sea, but I think if you go down on TIPO, it kind of affects the consistency of Miss Bianca. You can change up the ratio with Arthur, Along King Zeus, Let It Go, Fire the Cannons, Grab Your Swords, and you could potentially play again cards like Let the Storm the Rage On and Strength of the Raging Fire, just because you're playing BELLE and Miss Bianca as well. But I think that might lose you points against Ruby decks. I think all these other forms of removal is just very strong into everything. You can play a bodycard character like Miss Cluck or Chen Po, just because we are playing Whole New World, but I think those cards are just a little bit too slow right now. Maurice's Workshop is another strong card, just because you're able to play for free with the new legendary TAMATOA, but since we're playing Whole New World, it might not be needed. You could always play Mr. Smee if you wanted to. If you feel like you're just not seeing your turn to your ramp and you're falling behind in border control, you can always replace the Talas with Mr. Smee and mess around with the ratios through that way. But I think Mr. Smee is not needed. Don't be afraid to try to play without Mr. Smee. I think for set 7, we need to focus on what the deck's good at, and that's just ramping and getting ahead of your opponent. That sums up the deck profile, deck guide, mulligans, and tech choices. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So far in my testing, this deck has worked. It's been really strong into pretty much every deck, and being able to get Miss Bianca out on turn 3 and doing some shenanigans on turn 4 is just super fun and super strong. If you guys did enjoy the video, please go ahead and leave a like. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And again, if you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It definitely means a lot to me. And I just, again, want to say thank you for everyone who has supported me. And I have some awesome content for set 7 in the works. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a good day. Peace out.